Hello, my name is Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to the Geek Show for another episode of Impossible Mission. Yes, if you're listening to this on your podcast provider, please do subscribe. Or if you're listening to, or watching this, I should say, on YouTube, do click subscribe, like, and that notification bell. Or whatever people do with notification bells. It's in the privacy of their own home. It's their choice what they do with it.
We won't go into that.
Lots of people smash them. Some people click them. Anybody's choice.
Yeah, I always thought smashing bells was quite a euphemistic turn of phrase.
Yeah, and also the bell won't be much use afterwards, would it?
Yeah, it's certainly a double entendre.
Yeah, the bell ringers in the church spires would be very upset about what people are doing with those bells. But enough of that. We're talking about video games.
Oh.
Yeah, they should never go on YouTube, those people.
No. Anyway, post-ConsoleSEGA.
Yes, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because on the channel elsewhere, I recently reviewed 2 Point Hospital. Short version, loved it. There's also...
the short version was you loved it.
Loved it, yes.
You loved it.
Okay, I said that weird. I loved that game. Yakuza, they published that.
Yeah.
And I think it was March or February in PlayStation Plus to put out Sonic, which is constant.
Yeah.
That's
Hang on,
it.
did Sega do 2 Point Hospital?
They published it, yeah.
All right. I wasn't aware of that. Because that's basically the spiritual successor to Theme
No,
Hospital.
it's not just spiritual successor. It's people who worked at Bullfrog worked on that.
Really?
People who worked at Bullfrog set up 2 Point Studios and made that. So it's very much, it is Theme Hospital.
So it basically made your day completely.
Yeah, we did a previous video on this series back when it was called Press X, where we called them the scariest games in the world.
Yeah.
I put it on at 5 and at midnight.
But I bet it was the happiest 7 hours you've had for a while.
I don't know if there was any emotion to it. We're just kind of sort of harmlessly staring at the screen, managing stuff, sort of in this sort of weird Zen state. And then you think, I wonder what time it is. I'll go and get something to wait. Oh no, it's midnight.
What does gormless actually mean?
Sort of like your mouth hanging open, sort of distant.
No,
you're there,
I mean,
but you're not there.
But I mean, what is gorm?
We've had this conversation before. You got plenty of gorm, or you have none. Yeah, I mean, to talk about post-console Sega, you have to talk about console Sega, don't you?
Yes.
As a kid, I think in Americans were much more adopters of Nintendo. It was much more of an American thing. Oh, in this country, the posh kids had Nintendo, whereas the working class kids had Sega. That's how I remembered it anyway.
I remember it a little bit differently, but I go back a bit further than you do. For us, the posh kids had either Nintendo or Sega. This was back in the original days of the Master System.
That'd be the NES, yeah.
The posh kids had like Ataris and Nintendos and Segas, whereas us working class kids had we basically had to settle for going around to our mate's house and playing on their Ataris or Nintendos or Segas. And then you had the era of the ZX Spectrum 48K.
That was the first one I had, yeah.
The 48K with its rubber keys.
Because it wasn't until the PlayStation 1 that I actually caught up.
Yeah.
I was always a generation behind.
And the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Amazing machine. Well beloved.
But regardless of that, I was very much a Sega kid.
Yeah. Do you know what the great thing about the Master System was of the Nintendo? Of the NES?
My memories of it are very vague. I mean, I don't know whether the NES had it, but the Master System had a game built in.
Yep. That was exactly what I was about to say.
And looking at it now, I mean, the numbers that are thrown around for the next generation of Microsoft and PlayStation,
yeah,
I think that'd be a very good gesture of goodwill if they started building games into the console again.
Yeah.
Like pre-loaded game or two.
Well, I mean, they do that with their exclusive packs these days. You get a game with it, but
it's not more. It's not built in, though, is it?
But that's the thing. You have to pay more for the extra game that comes with it.
Because that was such a good idea, I think, looking back at it. It'd be nice to have that back.
But, I mean, I suppose you can only really do that if you're the actual manufacturer of the console and the developer of the game at the same time.
Well, there's first-party studios, there's second-party studios. There's lots of them that you could pick. You could put, like, Spider-Man on it and it'd be okay to do that.
Well, I think
or something like that, or God of War. Or
Nintendo's, they were still doing that with the 3DS. I think it was because the version of the 3DS that we have is the Link Between Worlds version, and that actually had Zelda: A Link Between Worlds pre-installed on the console.
Yeah.
Before we actually bought it.
moving on to the Mega Drive, or the Sega Genesis as it was called in other territories, which is a very different naming scheme.
Yeah, but obviously someone was a Phil Collins fan.
Yeah, an American was mad on Phil Collins.
That's not a thought I want. That's not a thought I want.
I love the Mega Drive, honestly. I can't... as far as fondness of gaming, that's where I fell in love with games, like, properly.
Well, that's where a lot of people fell in love with games. The weird thing is...
Because it was like, the games in particular I'm talking about here are Streets of Rage, GoldenEye. Not GoldenEye, that was a bit further. Golden Axe.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, which I love.
Do you know, just going back a second, because you've literally just reminded me of this. When the Mega Drive came out and when the SNES came out, I remember this because...
It was very much, going back to that point, that was when it was posh kids off working class kids. Posh kids got the SNES. Working class kids got the Mega Drive.
Yeah, and it was very much a north-south divide.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was a lot more of a north-south divide than people think. I remember this because I was at uni in the mid-90s, right? And when I went down to university, up here, very few people had a SNES.
Yeah.
Most people had Mega Drives up around where we are in the northeast. But when I went to uni in London, pretty much everybody had a SNES. Most people didn't have a Mega Drive.
I don't know. I don't think there was that much of a difference in the price. I think they were kind of comparable.
They were kind of comparable, but I think it was just a matter of... I think part of it was a matter of marketing strategy. And I think part of it was accessibility. And I think part of it was looking at historical sales of the Master System and the NES, for example.
Maybe. But following the Mega Drive, was the Sega Saturn, was it?
Yeah, and...
That was a big misstep for him.
Yeah. See, this is where a lot of people who do like video games history know that the Sega Saturn was, it had potential, but the problem that they had was that Nintendo was also working on a disk system.
Which became the PlayStation. This is well documented stuff, so we're not, we're just treading over all ground. But the Saturn was a console that shouldn't have existed. What Sega should have done was focus their development. Because what Sega did, right, the big problem that Sega had with consoles was that they did the Mega Drive, right? But then they did a disc system, the Mega CD. Yeah, they did lots of alternative versions of the Mega Drive. There was tons of them.
Well, there was the Mega Drive and the Mega Drive 2. Fine, right? Yeah. No problem with the Mega Drive.
There we go. There's a mid-cycle update for you.
Yeah.
Sega were way ahead of the game.
Yeah. So Mega Drive 2, no problem. But then they had this Mega CD and then the Mega CD 2, right? But then, on top of that, and for no reason at all, they had the 32X.
I can't remember that one.
The 32X was basically, you take this plug-in that goes into the top of the Mega Drive, and then you can play 32-bit cartridges instead of 16-bit cartridges.
Kind of like on the N64 where they had that, what was it called? It made games a little bit better graphically.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it was called.
It was the that expansion thing that you slotted in into the...
I remember Pokemon Stadium used it.
Yeah. But that was the thing. If Sega hadn't wasted so much money doing all of that and focused that money into developing...
well, that's the same thing that ruined Atari, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely no humility.
Yeah. And I think that was the thing. Sega wanted to develop. They wanted to innovate. They wanted to pioneer. But I think their actual strategy at the time was way, way, way off base.
Yeah, and it wasn't... There was some great games on the Saturn, don't get me wrong, like Panzer Dragoon, I think it was called.
Yeah, Panzer Dragoon Saga and stuff like that. I can't
really remember much else, to be honest.
There are a few great games on the Saturn, but the problem that the Saturn had was that it was coming off the back of the Mega Drive, Mega CD, 32X.
And the competition was...
The competition at that point
was ridiculously successful.
Well, I can't remember if the Saturn came out first or the PlayStation came out.
Yeah.
The Saturn came out first, but the PlayStation came out not long after. And what Sega should have done, they shouldn't have released the Saturn, right? If they'd basically just held back and said, right, we're not going to release the Saturn. Sony are releasing this PlayStation. It's a brilliant console. We're not going to get involved in this fight. We're going to save all our efforts and develop the Dreamcast properly.
Yeah.
Sega would probably still be in the console market.
Well, it was different then. I mean, we all talk about the console... Well, I say all. People talk about the console war now. It wasn't a thing so much then. It was more... No, it was a thing. Just now it's who won this, who won that. It's all... like competition fighting tooth and nail. Whereas then it was a bit more just like normal business.
No.
I think the internet has exacerbated it then. Okay.
The internet. See, this is the thing. The internet's made things worse than they actually are now, right? And that's just mainly from the fans.
Yeah.
Right.
But I was on about sort of the fans' perspective of it, rather than the corporate perspective.
From a corporate perspective, when you have adverts going out that say Nintendo does what Sega don't.
All right. You have better memories of this then. Okay. It's fine. But anyway, moving on to the Dreamcast, which kind of course-corrected a bit too much.
Well, like I said, I think the big misstep for Sega wasn't the Dreamcast.
It was a fantastic console.
That's what I mean.
It was undone by the amount of peripherals it had, but
picture the scenario, though.
It was an excellent console.
Yeah. Picture the scenario, though. Sega don't release the 32X, so they save money on that. They don't release the Saturn, so they save money on that, and they focus their efforts on developing the Dreamcast. And instead of having these two non-starters, they save a crap load of cash, put a load of cash into the development of the Dreamcast, and also into getting developers on board making games with the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
And then they release the Dreamcast which when it comes out then is more comparable to the PlayStation 2 only a year before.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I only jumped ship to PlayStations because Sega died.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who are like that, to be honest.
Exactly. But I mean, the Dreamcast was an amazing console. The first console to be internet ready.
The amount of stone cold classics it had.
Yeah.
Like Sega Bass Fishing, obviously.
Jet Set Radio, Sega Bass Fishing.
Sega Bass Fishing is the only game that was ever on the Sega Dreamcast. It's the best game of all time.
I mean...
yes.
When it comes to... take fighting games, for example.
Power Stone. I had Power Stone, all-time great.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to talk about Power Stone. What I was going to talk about was the Sega arcade stick, right? One of the peripherals that you got.
There was way too many peripherals to remember. There was like that, Samba the Amiga, was it? That had the drums?
Had the maracas.
Oh, yeah. What was the one with the drums?
That's Donkey Konga on the GameCube.
No, there's another game that had drums, sort of a rhythm action game where you had drums. I can't remember what that is, but that's not important. But if you do remember it, comment below to remind me.
But the thing is, the Dreamcast had a karaoke machine. It had a webcam. It had a broadband adapter.
Yeah, it had a keyboard.
Yeah, a keyboard, for mouse.
I think Typing of the Dead, that was so.
Well, no, it was actually internet ready, so with keyboard and mouse were actually for the internet.
Oh, okay.
But also for games like Outrigger.
And it had, on the controller, it had like a little cavern cut in it. And you could put like I can't remember what I called it.
It was a VMU, Visual Memory Unit.
And you could play Choo Choo Rocket. That was a game which made great use out of that.
Not just that, there were other games that actually used the VMU, like Skies of Arcadia and some of the Sonic games.
Yeah, to say that the Dreamcast was ahead of its time is possibly the biggest understatement in video game history.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If you picture the scenario then, no 32X, no Saturn, it's all gone to the Dreamcast.
It would have been nice. I mean, Sega would have been a major contender. It would have been a 4-horse race. Maybe even Microsoft never happened.
I don't think the Xbox would have happened because
the Xbox climbed out of the wreckage of the Dreamcast.
Yeah, because I mean the Dreamcast was running on Windows CE.
So that was a absolute collapse of Sega, it seemed, at the time, which is a heartbreaking thing because Sega, everyone knows Sega. Sonic is possibly one of the most identifiable people in video game history, despite his very, 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 very patchy record of games. Yeah,
but on the flip side, apparently the movie's not bad.
For what it is, yeah.
Apparently it's rather enjoyable.
But what is Sega now then?
Well, Sega aren't a console manufacturer, we know that, but I think what Sega have...
Just on that, I don't think it's impossible for them not to be again. The game industry changes so much, I don't think that door is closed forever.
I don't know. See, the thing is, I think there'd have to be some major changes.
I mean, the fact that Microsoft can become like a multi-billion-dollar video game developer means that it can happen for other companies too. So all I'm being is an eternal optimist and saying I don't think Sega are out of that race yet.
See,
out of that world forever, I mean.
If anything, what I would say, right, two things I'd say for post-console Sega. Number one, they had a lot of IPs that really are Stone Cold classics.
Yeah, they did.
Right? Yakuza being just one of them.
Yeah, that was the big one that came out with the embers of Shenmue.
Yeah.
It was basically Shenmue 3, Yakuza 1.
Yeah.
It took the same engine, the same style of gameplay.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just ran off into the sunset with it.
Exactly. But I think the other thing as well with post-console Sega is that now we live in an era where, and I think this is possibly a route that Sega could go down.
Yeah.
Right? Not the console route.
Well, no, I don't think this. I think the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One X is going to be the last traditional console. It's going to be much more online based for future.
I ain't even talking about PC based or on.
No. I mean, it's online, like cloud stuff and on streaming stuff.
Well,
that'll be PlayStation 6 and Xbox 750 or something. I don't know. They change the naming scheme all the time.
Let me ask you a question. Right? Imagine that. See, I reckon that all the manufacturers are going to head down this route at some point. Nintendo are probably closer to it than anyone else, but it's also an avenue that Sega could go down, right? And it has to do with handheld gaming.
Well, the Switch, yeah, that's basically a handheld console and a home-based console.
Yeah, but the success of the Switch, and it got me thinking about Sega have this massive catalogue of games that, and a lot of them have never been re-released.
Sat dormant for a long time.
Yeah. Now, imagine you had access to a handheld device that had Sega's back catalogue of games on it, right?
Yes.
But from that device, you could also browse the internet. You could download apps from the Play Store. You could basically do all sorts of other things, and you could also make calls.
Yeah. You're talking about, what was it?
Smartphone development now has come so far. And you have so many companies now who are involved in making smartphones, especially cheap and cheerful ones.
I don't think that phrase works anymore. Cheap and cheerful. The technology of the smartphone world means that the cheap phone now is basically like the flagship from 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, I mean, if you look at a company like Realme, right? The Realme X2 Pro is like flagship level technology in a phone that costs less than 500 quid.
Yeah.
Right? And how much does the Switch cost?
Switch is about 300.
300 something, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you basically turn the Switch into a phone, because don't forget, Nokia already did this.
Engage, yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was what I was trying to remember, yeah.
So, what would happen if Sega came around with the Sega phone?
Well, that's very pie in the sky thinking, but I think...
How many Sega fans would basically look at the Sega phone as a serious thing, right? And say, I'm having that because it's Sega.
It'll have to be a collaboration with another company.
Yeah.
I don't know who it'd be. Sony are sort of peeling themselves away from the mobile phone market because it's not going well for them.
Yeah. But I'll be honest.
It'd have to be another Japanese company.
Well, not necessarily. I'll be honest. The only company that I'd see wanting to get involved in a video game bit, because don't forget, the Asus ROG 2, the Black Shark 2, and the, that Nubia Red Magic 3. Those are all video game phones.
Yeah, and the Razer phone as well.
Yeah, and the Razer phone as well. They're all, because mobile gaming is a big thing.
Yeah.
There's a massive market there. And Nokia, I reckon, probably want to get back involved with video game-based phones.
Well, Nokia they're a Finnish-owned company now, I think.
Yeah.
And they have really pulled it back together again. That name, anyway.
So what would happen if Nokia made a deal with Sega to develop a new phone, a video game phone?
And we call it the 90s phone, because the two most 90s things in the world, Nokia with Snake and Sega, come together to change the world.
Well, why not?
Well, that's very hypothetical, but I think more down to earth. I think, Sega, there's more to Sega yet, because they can't just focus solely on these very small independent games. Like, as good as Theme, Two Point Hospital is, that's not the sort of thing that a Titan like Sega is built on.
No.
Yakuza showed that there could be basically AAA.
Yeah.
Because that's what the most recent ones are. Yakuza 6.
Yakuza 6 is a AAA game.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, the Yakuza Kiwami games are AAA games.
And Zero.
I think from Yakuza 4 or 5 on the PlayStation 3, they were AAA games all the way through.
Yeah, because not all AAA games are Ubisoft developed or EA or Bethesda
or Square Enix, or
other companies do them too.
yeah.
It's just because they're not bad. It seems that AAA is a phrase that's only used when it's referring to a bad thing. And there's also good aspects of that world too, and I think Yakuza shows that that is a good aspect of that world. But yeah, the fact that they're doing AAA games shows that there's more in them than a barely functioning giant.
See, what
And the fact that they're putting out so many Sega Sonic stuff, and the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, what I would love to see Sega do, all right, if they don't get it back into the console market and they just stick with video games, what I'd love to see them do is basically do with video games what Nintendo are doing with consoles, right? And be the odd duck. Basically, just look at video games as this massive playground and say, right, we're going to let our imagination run wild and free because that's what it's there for, and we're going to just look at video games developers and we're going to say, okay, you're doing something weird and interesting. We want to work with you. You're doing something weird and interesting. We're gonna work with you, and get the weirdos, get the mad, crazy video game developers, and just get all these really imaginative people who are working in games and making games, and get them all involved with Sega and start doing just these because I mean, Yakuza, right, is a prime example of just bizarre ideas in a video game.
Yeah.
And we talk about that on the Yakuza video, so I'm not going to go into that. But that's what Sega should be doing, because that's what makes games interesting.
My angle on this is, how long is it since Sega actually released something big like a console? We're talking, what, about 2002? Something like that?
2000 was the Dreamcast, wasn't it?
And they're still a household name.
Yeah.
That shows how big they are.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's over for them by a long shot.
I mean, if you look at the video game developers and the publishers from the 80s and 90s, I mean, you had
Ubisoft's not a household name.
The weird thing is,
Bethesda's not a household name.
One of the only developers,
Sega is,
right? There's only a couple of developers that have lasted through that time, through the decades.
Yeah.
EA have lasted, right? Capcom, bizarrely enough.
Well, if you're going to talk about in a household name sort of as the framing tool, yeah, I'd say EA, Capcom, Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and Sega.
Well, I'm not even
properly. Everybody knows about those.
I'm not talking about that though. I'm talking about if you look at publishers from when I was a kid and from when you were a kid.
Yeah.
You had publishers like Ocean and US Gold and Psygnosis and various others like that, right? Even Sierra have fallen by the wayside.
Still hanging on a line.
Well, I say fallen by the wayside. They're still hanging on by a thread, but they're nowhere near the titans that they used to be.
No.
And so what I'm saying is that it's bizarre that Capcom have a staying power that is just weird.
And they're going from like height to height now with the Resident Evil
exactly.
stuff.
EA, I think from the advent of their first sports games, they've gone mammoth. Ubisoft, I think, didn't Ubisoft come out from Infogrames?
Might have, yeah. They're a French-Canadian company.
Yeah,
though, so.
I think Ubisoft and I think Infogrames eventually became Ubisoft, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
But my point is also true as well. When you're talking about genuine names of companies that people know outside of games, Sega is still one of the biggest.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think it's over for them, and I think there's a future which is exciting beyond just releasing loads and loads of identikit or rubbish Sonic games and Yakuza.
Like I said, my idea's out there. Nokia, get in touch with Sega, right? The two of you work together, do like the Sega 90 phone.
It'd be like the size of a brick. There you go.
Have you seen the ROG 2?
No.
It's a brick.
And on that bombshell, I think that's it for this week's episode of Impossible Mission. Thanks for watching.